How's it going, guys? I'm Robert from Machado Visuals, and welcome back to Gearside Chat. I'm super excited to be back here again, live streaming with you all, and work has been honestly pretty slow for me lately, so I'm glad I'm able to have some time to focus a little bit more on creating content for the channel, and thank you for those of you just tuning in. And now that everything is remote, I'm much more prepared. I think we all are to start doing a little bit more remote interviews. So that's kind of where I want these Gearside chats to go. Since we're now on episode 6, we have finally surpassed my failed podcast pictures up, but that's all good because now that we're all remote, I'll have chances to talk with I'll have a lot more reach in terms of talking with colleagues and friends and stuff like that. So I'm going to do my best to keep engaged with the chat. So if you have any specific questions for me or for Brandon, obviously field them through and I'll do my best to monitor them. And Las Vegas is also experiencing a severe weather thunderstorm right now. So we have like 60-mile-per-hour winds. So if my power goes out and the stream just suddenly ends, you know why. And so without further ado, our guest today is Brandon Washington. He's a full-time content creator, YouTuber, filmmaker, the whole nine. And he's recently announced that he is transitioning to YouTube full-time. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit and get his rationale. And before we dive into that and bring him on the stream, I want to play his channel trailer to give you an idea of what he's all about. So here's Brandon.
What's good, creative fam? Brandon Washington here. I am a full-time filmmaker, published photographer, and licensed drone pilot, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Over the past 7 years, I have been studying this craft that is content creation, filmmaking, photography, drones, and I want to bring all that knowledge here to my YouTube channel. So why am I on YouTube? Well, I love teaching. I love sharing my knowledge with other people when it comes to this craft that I love so much. And I don't know if it has to do with the fact that both my parents were teachers or the fact that I just love gear and the technology around filmmaking so much that I can't just talk to my friends about it anymore. I have to share it with a bigger audience. So I am super pumped about this YouTube channel and I can't wait to share my knowledge and the things that I've been picking up in this industry with you guys. So what are some of the things you're gonna find on here? Well, obviously you're gonna find gear reviews because I am a massive gearhead. I love buying new camera equipment. You're also gonna find tutorials, things that are gonna teach you how to be a better creator. And of course, you're also gonna get some industry tips, not to mention our weekly Motivational Mondays, where every Monday I'm gonna post a brand new video motivating you guys to get out and keep creating. And occasionally you'll catch a vlog here or there. I'm not a huge vlogger, but from time to time, if I think the moment's worth it, you'll definitely catch a vlog in there. So if you're a content creator and you're looking to grow, learn, and you're just obsessed with gear and tutorials and tips like I am, well, this is the perfect channel for you. I definitely ask you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button because you're not gonna wanna miss any of the videos dropping on this channel. And of course, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.
And there you have it, Brandon, welcome to Gearside Chat. I'm super glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited. It's I don't ever really look back at my older videos, and so watching that channel trailer definitely come a long way since I published that. But thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that channel trailer was a little bit dated. Maybe it's just I'm just subtly reminding you that you should probably maybe update that. But all good in the hood. No worries. But as I mentioned before, I'd like to dive into a little bit more of your background and also more so your recent stuff and kind of what you're doing nowadays, and as we navigate the world that is YouTube. So before we start, because I know we're going to get questions about it, tell me about your camera setup right now. What are you using? What does that look like?
Yeah, so right now I'm actually using a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K going through a Metabone speed booster, the 6.7 FX7 one, the one that almost gets it to full frame. It's just a little bit shy. And then that is being used with a Zine 35 millimeter T 1.4 lens, I believe it is. And it's complete overkill for this, but this is kind of my standard YouTube setup. I actually have the camera and everything all rigged up directly into the wall, so it cannot come down. Like, it's permanently stationed there, and it has a lot to do with just that quick ability to hop into content creation mode. And then as far as audio, going into a Shure SM7B, and that is just XLR'd in directly to the camera, just using a cloud lifter, because microphones like this need a little bit more gain in order to actually have usable sound. So that's like the quick and dirty setup. But this whole room, this whole office is designed specifically for content creation. So it doesn't change that much.
No, I actually really dig that. And that's kind of, I just recently moved, so I've kind of also redesigned my set with that in mind, kind of similarly. So I like that your camera's just bolted onto the wall. Kind of same with me. I have like a tiny walk-in closet that I ripped the doors out of, and I just stick my tripod in there. So I'm kind of similar in that regard. But so you're still using the Pocket 4K for all your YouTube stuff?
So all my A-roll is shot on the Pocket 4K. That is my A-roll camera. It's set up in the office, doesn't move. Even if I go do client work or passion projects, whatever, I take one of my other cameras and go shoot that. This camera has to stay here. This lens has to stay here, because I just found that for me, like, if I had to build up and tear down my YouTube setup, I just would get, I just wouldn't create, because it'd be just that extra hurdle, that extra thing that I would feel like I needed to do before I could create a video. So
I extra feel that, and that was one of my main thought processes on why I bought an FX6, is so that can kind of primarily be my YouTube camera, and it's been working out so far. Like, I enjoy it, but no, I feel that, because before, whenever I had to shoot talking head stuff, like in my office, like breaking out all the lights, breaking out all the breaking out everything was just, it was such an obstacle, and it was such a, it was so difficult and so demanding that I was just like, I'm over it.
yeah, no, 100%. I definitely recommend that, like, if you're gonna take YouTube seriously, that you should like build out some type of set and just have like that year just be like dedicated to that. Now, I mean, if you're a vlogger, I guess it's a little different, but like if you're doing like A-roll stuff like this, I mean, having everything like situated. So especially if you're already like a filmmaker and you're kind of like, if you're using the same lights you take to a client project on your YouTube channel, every time you do a client project, you basically destroy your YouTube setup, which then means if you want to shoot YouTube, now you got to take twice as long setting everything back up. And then you lose kind of that uniformity by having like your lights set the exact same way every single time. So there's just a lot of pros to just having like a dedicated YouTube setup.
Yeah, those are like tremendous tips right there, and we'll dive a little bit more into those as we go on. But first, I want to talk about your start and how you got into filmmaking. So when did you discover filmmaking, and where did you find that passion?
Yeah, so I actually jumped into filmmaking about 10 years ago. It was like right after I graduated high school. So I always tell people, like, I didn't pick up a camera in high school, so like I didn't have it then. But I actually started out as like a b-boy, like a break dancer. And like me and my crew, we like discovered this thing called YouTube, and like all these other dancers were like, taking their videos and putting them online and showcasing like their skills to everyone else. And so that's when I initially picked up my first camera, was just to like shoot some video of my crew and like the other dancers that I was around. And I quickly found that like I enjoyed shooting and editing the videos more than actually even being in the videos myself. And so then I kind of went through this stage of just like consistently shooting videos for other dancers just around the Houston area, which is where I live now and where I'm from. And that's really kind of how I got it. I mean, like, it literally sparked from just like my love for dance and then wanting to capture that, and then ultimately realizing like, oh, I like this thing even more, and just doing it as a hobby for a couple years after that.
Yeah, I think that there's something key there too, because that's one thing that when I was first starting out too, that's like basically what I did is I merged my like two hobbies. So it was like I was really into band and the marching band, all that stuff. So I would film my high school marching band, just like really really terrible videos, but it was fun at the time. So eventually that progressed to what it is now, and I think when you're first starting out, that's an important thing to kind of maybe find is the right word, is to like find your hobby or something you enjoy doing and then see how you can implement video into that.
Yeah, I think that is big. I mean, I think when you're just getting started, it's important to film things that you actually want to film, because you're going to go through so many learning hurdles during that first initial like trial period. And if you're filming stuff that you don't really want to be filming, it makes those trials way more difficult. But if at least you're enjoying the process of shooting, if you come back and you realize that you shot everything, with the wrong frame rate or wrong settings or something like that, you won't really you won't really push yourself down too much, because you'll just have that much fun going out and filming it again, this time, taking the learns along the journey. So
Speaking of on learning, back then, what were some of the ways you were? Because to my understanding, you're self-taught. So what were some of the things that you were doing back then to help facilitate that?
yeah, so yeah, I'm 100% self-taught. Didn't get a chance to go to film school or anything like that. I definitely would have gone if I had the opportunity, but just because of finances and life and whatever, those cards weren't on the table for me. So I learned a lot initially from YouTube. So this is like literally what brought me to YouTube, and like I didn't know YouTube was a thing before I started getting into filmmaking. And the first channel I ever found was actually Film Riot. And so I learned a lot of little basics on there. And then I also learned a lot of my editing stuff from, a lot of people know him as Zach King now, but like back in the day, he was
Final
the
Cut
Final
King.
Cut King. Yeah, and so I learned basically Final Cut back in the day from him, and it's crazy to see how his career has like progressed so rapidly and changed drastically. But yeah, basically YouTube taught me a lot when I was first getting started. And then basically just like meeting other people who shoot video along the way and learning from them. I mean, I am definitely a student first, and so I try to go everywhere, and if I'm around other creators, I like to see what they're doing, and like especially if like I see something and it like hooks me, it gravitates to me, like I basically become like a badger mole. Like I just start diving in deep and like burrowing into the knowledge. It's actually the way I found you. I saw one of your videos on lighting and realized that everything I thought I knew, I didn't. And then I think I spent like literally like 2 or 3 weeks like watching everything that you had put on
Oh
YouTube.
my.
And then I was like, why don't more people know about you? Like I was really like, I was like, why isn't his subscribers higher? And so that's when I think I made a video like promoting you, and I shared you on my Instagram, and I was like everyone who thinks they're learning about lighting, you're doing it wrong. Go watch Robert. So
Well, hey, I definitely appreciate that. It's funny because I get those comments all the time. It's like, why doesn't this channel have more subs? But I talk about it with my friends all the time, and colleagues and stuff like that. But I actually like being more of an underground channel. Like I like the smaller community, and like the kind of I definitely have a lot less subs than most people, but I think the following and subscribers and the people that follow me, I think they're very dedicated. So there's, especially with me, because there's almost a barrier to entry to my channel, right? Because, I'm over here talking about exposure indexes on S-Log3 and how to rate all this things, and someone picking up a A7S3 for the first time is like, what the heck is this dude talking about? So there's definitely a barrier to entry, but yeah.
100%. No, I heard a really good analogy for that, and they were talking about my channel, but I think it works with your channel too. And it's like, if you're looking at the world of YouTube, your channel for sure is probably more like year 3, year 4 of college. And so there's a bunch of other things they need to learn before they
Yeah.
get to your channel. And
That's a great way to put
unfortunately,
it.
a lot of people drop out of college year 1, year 2. So I think that's the reason why like certain channels that are more advanced don't see the same type of subscribers, because they're not going after noobs, like newbie, like filmmakers, but the ones who do end up making it as far to where they're actually learning something from your channel. I think they are going to be more like dedicated, and they're there and they're really looking to learn. And I find that also that audience is far less toxic. So I think it's just, you can't really judge the numbers because it's not apples to apples, but I think that, there's a little bit more weight in a channel like yours, and probably a little bit more weight in the subscribers that you have as well.
Yeah, that's a really awesome way. I've never thought of it as like a level 300 or 400 level class. I really like that. That's awesome. And then also really quick before we go on, we have a comment. I want to just bring up a comment from Certain Exposures here. He says, if this will come up, maybe that's, I need to adjust the text is black, so it's not coming up, but he's here for your gym routine. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit later, but so kind of running off the thoughts on film school, you obviously didn't go, but do you think that affected your kind of knowledge base, or like how do you feel about kind of where you are now? Do you feel like not going kind of hindered you in a way, or what are your thoughts?
So I am naturally a go-getter type person. So like I said, like if I don't know something, I'm going to, dive in deep. I'm going to figure it out on my own. And so, if I was able to go to film school, like the way I look at it is I would have learned a lot of the things that I didn't know faster. And so for me, I feel like it would have been great. And I would have just been a little bit further ahead. Now, the one area, and this isn't really has to do with filmmaking, but like I'm not a creature of like debt. I don't like debt. I don't believe in going into debt. So like everything I buy cash. And so if going to film school, which in this case is kind of where I was, it was going to put me in a bunch of like student loan debt. For me, it wasn't worth it. I felt like I could figure it out on my own. And even if that meant it was going to take me 6 years to figure it out on my own versus going to school for 4 years, that 2 years was worth it to not have to go into debt. That being said, if you are in a situation where, like your parents can afford for you to go to school, or, you aren't someone, and I mean, you have to kind of be truthful with yourself. Like if you're not the type of person that's gonna, take rejection or be able to try to figure these things out for yourself and do research and watch videos and read books and things like that, then going to school would probably be really good for someone like that. But at the end of the day, like I think that the benefit of going to classes, if you could go to film school, it's just there are things that like you don't know that you don't know. And until somebody tells you about it or you hear about it, you don't even know to study it. And so like, like exposure index, like your channel was the first time I had ever really heard of exposure index and really saw someone like break down like how to light meter and like how to balance like color and how to use RGB lights like the sky panel to just match existing room colors in order to get like a solid exposure and not have weird color temperatures. And like I saw that and I was like, that's why some people's footage looks better than others. And it allowed me to, it like unlocked a new room for me, and it allowed me to go and figure that out. That was like year 7 or 8 in this filmmaking journey for me that I'm just now hearing about it, where I'm willing to bet if I were to go to film school, I would have probably heard that like year 3. And I would have at least been able to decide to like study it and learn more about it. So those are like some of the reasons why I say like film school and like education is really important, because you don't know everything, and it's impossible to know everything. And you never know how long like something so simple you just missed could have easily been taught to you if you would have just sought some education ahead of time. So that's just my thought on it. But
yeah, it's interesting.
I'm just one person.
No, definitely. It's interesting because I was never taught any of those things in film school, because for me, film school gave me this. Film school gave me the structure, and film school gave me a mentor. it gave me the structure, mentor, and networking. Like those were the three main things. And so once I got out of film school, I started to appreciate the education way more than when I was in film school. When I was in film school, I was like, dude, I just want to be done with this. I just want to do this full time. Like, I just want to be over. But now that I'm out of it, I'm like, oh wow, I kind of want to, like, maybe take a few more I want to go back almost. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that like, especially in the past couple of years, a lot of those finer nuances, nobody told me in film school. So I don't know where that kind of whole thing came from, but I think it's just kind of my genuine kind of curiosity and of science, because ultimately that's what we are. We capture light. So it's, understanding
Yeah.
the science to leverage your technical ability into visual storytelling. So it's interesting. I think a lot of people say that, oh man, if I similar to your sentiment, like if I went to film school, I might have learned this or that, but in actuality, I learned, like, especially in the last 2 years, I've learned, I would say, more on my own than what I got out from film school. Because film school gave me basically the principles, but based on those principles, I took those and built off of that on my own. So I was just
And I think the other part that you mentioned, the networking and the connection, like that can be very difficult when you're just getting going. I mean, like, the idea that not everyone has to be a director or a DP is very difficult when you're dealing with a lot of people who are, self-taught. Like, it's very hard for me to find someone who's like a gaffer, or like someone who just wants to be an AC, or someone who just wants to play those different roles. But when you go with people who've been, those different specialty roles. And I think in film school, you can find those type of people a lot easier. And also you're around a lot more like-minded people who can kind of help with you and kind of keep that drive and kind of are looking to move forward. And when you're doing it kind of on your own, you kind of have to like find those people on your own and just like hope that you gel with them and like connect with them and want to keep working together. Now, again, I'm speaking like back when I could have gone to film school. Today, I mean, you can find people on Instagram with like a hashtag. So it's probably a lot easier now than it was back when, I would have gone to film school. Because now if I'm looking for like a certain type of a person, it's a lot easier thanks to the internet and social media.
And that's something I've definitely noticed, at least in the past 2, 3, maybe 3 years, is that the level of information available has gotten a lot better too. Because when I was kind of first dabbling with this YouTube thing in like 2016, 2017, I would, watch a lot of YouTube stuff, and I just got angry. I was like, dude, this is garbage. So that was actually a big reason and a big push for why I started creating, because I was like, well, if these people aren't doing it, then I want to. Maybe I'll do it myself, kind of thing. So it's interesting.
No, I think that's great.
Yeah, especially in regards to film school. Like, I'm a super introverted person, and I am terrible at meeting people. So like, film school is a great way for me to just force myself to work with people. Not only people, but like people that I necessarily wouldn't grab a beer with. So it kind of helps you in multifacets like that. But I want to kind of transition on and kind of move on into, you're starting to get your kind of foothold in filmmaking. And then based on one of the recent videos you put out, you said there was a key pivotal moment that kind of changed your life, which was having a kid. So I want to talk about how did you navigate that? And, obviously having a child is a huge commitment, and especially when you're trying to start out. So how did you navigate that?
Yeah. So me and my wife at the time, she was just my girlfriend. I was 19, she was 18. We had our first son, and I had been doing, I would say videography for a little while. Wasn't doing anything like real big financially with it. I mean, I was doing like some little ins and out jobs here and there, but I didn't really take it seriously. But what ended up happening was once we had our son, I was working, I think, at Best Buy at the time, and I just didn't control my schedule. I worked weird hours, closing shifts one night, then opening shifts the next night. And as our son was, slowly getting older, I just realized that like I wanted control. I wanted control of my life. I wanted control of my schedule. And for me, starting my own business was the easiest way to do that. And the only skill that I really had at the time was filmmaking. And so I started just looking into it and saying, like, okay, could this be a real career? Because if not, I need to let it go because it's a very expensive hobby. I tell people that all the time. Filmmaking is a very expensive hobby. So if it's not making you money, you need to be very clear with yourself. And for me, it was like, okay, this needs to be a career. So I basically put myself on like a 4-year plan on making it a full-time career. I had this goal which was at the time seemed crazy. But now it's actually come true and then some. But I basically told myself that by the time my son turns 5, I want to be working for myself, doing video production, because I want to be able to be at all his sporting events. Now, at the time, he was like, just about to turn 1 or something like that. And so he wasn't even near close to playing sports or whatever. But like that was like the goal I set for myself. Like I didn't want to have to request time off from a job in order to be at my son's birthday party or to be at, a baseball game or whatever. And that became my drive for the next couple years. And like I kind of had like this mantra where it was like short-term sacrifice, long-term gain. And so I just started like hustling like really hard, like reaching out to clients and, taking any job or any opportunity I could get my hands on and learning a lot about business. I listened to like so many different business books at the time, learned about entrepreneurship, learned about how to work with clients. Like I really dived in on the business side because I learned that like for me, like I've never thought I was the most talented filmmaker out there, but I could definitely outwork people. And if I understood business, I felt like I could, capture more jobs than the most talented filmmakers that were out. And so I learned like those were my 2 biggest strengths. And so I dived into those really hard. And, I'm happy to say that, I've been doing this now full time for a couple years. And I actually coach my son's baseball team. So I'm at
That's
every
awesome.
single practice, I'm at every single game. But it wasn't like, it wasn't easy. It was a lot of work, a lot of late nights, staying up late to edit, things like that. But like, it's definitely been a journey, but I give all of it to, first I give praise to God, but then I thank my son for just like changing my life and changing my mindset because before him, I don't really know if I could say like I had a trajectory for my life. I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, you heard it here, folk. Heard it here first. Have a child, and that will kick your butt into gear, and you'll become a successful filmmaker. That's what I just
step 1, have a kid. Yeah. I don't know if that's right for everybody, but I can say it was definitely right for me. No, man, it was, I love my kids and, now I have 2 boys and they motivate me every day. They inspire me. So,
That's awesome.
and they
That's
also
awesome.
keep me, they keep me on my toes.
Yeah, no, that'll definitely give you some drive if you don't have any. I don't currently have kids, so my drive just kind of, I've been doing this, ever since in high school. So that kind of, I'm lucky in the fact, I think you also mentioned this in your video, is that you didn't find, film and all this stuff till you were, maybe 19 or 20. Whereas me, I was lucky enough to find this way early on. So all the decisions that I've made thus far have been kind of centered around this career path. So, and so given that 4-year plan, I think you said it was that when you decided to quit your day job? Like when did you know it was time to quit your day job?
So, me and my wife made a plan and basically like I told her that like when I am financially able to take care of us, take care of all the bills, and I'm getting so much work in that like money is stored up. And we kind of had like this plan. And I tell a lot of people to make some type of a plan. So I had 6 months worth of income saved. That was like step 1. And then step 2 was I needed to be regularly making our income for 3 months. So for 3 months, I was making that. Now, granted, I was still working a full-time job at the time, so there was no sleep during this time. It was just crush hustle mode. But then the last kind of straw for me was I was working, I had transitioned out of Best Buy at the time, moved to Apple, was working there, and I was trying to work as many shifts as I could because I was technically full time there for benefits, insurance, all that other good stuff. But I was like calling in like a lot. Like if I got a job, I was like requesting, I was schedule changing, I was calling friends saying like, "Hey, can you cover my schedule on Friday night or whatever?" I was actually at one point, like I remember specifically, like I would pay someone $50 on top of them taking my schedule, like taking my shift, just so they would take my shift,
Wow.
just so I could go do the filmmaking job. Because the way I looked at it as an investment was I'm making way more doing the video job. So I'm just going to give some of that over to this person for them to take my shift. And now they're making,
A little
their
bit of
normal
extra
rate
incentive.
plus $50. Yeah. Just give them that little bit of incentive. But I did that until I felt like, okay, I'm really close to getting fired. And so my thought was, I want to quit before I get fired so I can leave on a positive note, just in case, this whole filmmaking thing doesn't work and I need to, bounce back over to Apple and work. And for me, like that was an easy move because like my job was Apple. Like Apple's a pretty successful company. If I quit and then 6 months later I need a job again, as long as I leave on a good note, I can always just reapply. Like the job isn't going anywhere. And so between saving up 6 months worth of monthly income, and then for the last like 3 months on top of that, like consistently hitting like our monthly needs, it made it a lot easier to just say like, all right, this is it. It's time to make that jump. Let's go ahead and do it. And I quit. And like before doing so, like we cut a lot of our monthly family expenses. So like we weren't eating out a whole bunch. We didn't have cable. Like we didn't, we did a lot of things. We made a lot of sacrifices to make it happen. But again, going back to my original mantra, it was short-term sacrifice, long-term gain. And what ended up happening for me was once I basically alleviated that 40 hours that I was giving to Apple every single month or every single week, I was able to like reinvest that into my business. I saw like just an explosion of what I was actually capable of and making sure that I was really being smart about how I allocated those hours.
Well, yeah, that's a really smart way to approach it too. Just kind of chipping away little by little until you're like financially secure enough to make that leap. I'm curious back then when you were balancing some of the freelance work and your day job, like how did you approach job? Like how did you get gigs? Because I know you got your start. Was it real estate?
Yeah. So for me, I did real estate. And I think that for most creators, this is probably the best way to go about it. Just because real estate is very flexible. So most of the time, realtors have a house, it's going to market soon enough. And so you can kind of schedule when you're free to do it. So the way I would do it was I would always schedule my 2 days off because I had 2 days off a week at Apple. I would schedule those for like all my real estate projects. So I would go shoot like 2, 3 houses a day on my days off, and just book them all like one after another after another. And then over the next couple nights, I would just stay up editing them, even to a point that like at while I'd be at Apple, like on a lunch break or on a 15 or something like that, I would bring my laptop and my hard drive and I would be editing real estate videos on my breaks at work. And again, it was just, I just wanted it. I wanted it really bad. And so for me, like that's what it took. And I found that real estate was the easiest market for me to get into just because there are so many real estate agents. I live in Houston and we're a pretty big city. I mean, we're a massive city. I mean, even our cities that live just right outside of Houston are massive and the population is just exploding. And so for me, there's just so many agents and realtors are heavily marketing themselves, which meant that they were basically sending me leads and paying for it. And so, it's kind of like with Facebook, like when they start running ads, I would click on a real estate agent, and then the next real estate agent that was running an ad, I'd click on them and send them a message. And then I got really like, I would talk to them and ask them like, okay, what do you need? Like, what works? What doesn't work? And I would pick their brain. And then the other nice thing is like, if you have a really good real estate agent and you take care of them, they sell a lot of houses. So they just keep giving you more repeat business, almost to a point to where like, I stopped even reaching out to new real estate agents because the ones I had were keeping me busy. And so that's kind of like the way that I did it. I found that it worked great for me. It's an easy job. It doesn't take much. You don't have to worry about people. There's not a whole lot of back and forth on edits. It's just an easy setup. Like you don't have to worry about lighting or audio or any of that stuff. It's easy, quick, and you can make some really good money.
And back then, when you were doing real estate stuff, were you also at the same time networking with other creatives and like meeting other people? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, at the time, I was just really in my hustle. I didn't really think too much about like working with other creators. That didn't really kind of start to jump off until I started to branch more into like the commercial space. Which is real estate actually opened that door for me as well. So the way I kind of jumped into the commercial space was I learned my first year after I quit Apple that in January or November, December, and January, people stop selling their houses because it's the holidays, which means if nobody's selling houses, there's nothing for me to do, which means there's no work coming in. So I was like, holy crap, I'm in trouble. And so I reached out to all of my agents and was like, hey, do you guys need branding videos right now? A new year is coming. Like, let's make something different. Let's not just do a house. And a couple of them reached back and had some work for me to do. And then a few of them were like, well, if you can do other stuff outside of houses, I know some business owners that might need some video as well. And I really leveraged the existing real estate relationships that I had in order to start to get me some of those commercial projects. And I learned with commercial projects that they are almost impossible to do on your own. You can try the one-man band thing, especially if you're like, really hungry and you're trying to keep all the cash, but just like the work is it's too much.
The
Like,
workload's
cause now
insane.
you start stepping into lighting and audio and camera and directing. And then there's the editing. And then on these type of projects, there's way more back and forth and typically way more pre-production. So there are bigger budgets, but for me, it was too much to try to do on my own. And so this is about the same time that I started working with other creators. And through the time, like I had made other creative friends and, we had known each other. And so like one of my really good friends, Sticks, he's always shot with me and has shot with me for years. And so he was definitely one of the first people that I called on. I was like, hey man, I got this job. I need some help. And basically like every job I've done since, it's always been like, okay, I look at this job and I'm like, okay, what would have made this job better? All right, having someone to just focus on lighting. Okay, cool. Let's go find a lighting person. And then like the next job, it was like, okay, what would have made that job better? And I was like, oh, having someone to focus on audio. Cool. Okay, next job, we need to bring an audio person out. And that's kind of how I just elevated up. Again, because I didn't go to film school initially, like I didn't know what the rules were and like how many people you're supposed to have on set, what all their roles were. So for me, it was like figuring out the problems that I was having and then looking for solutions. And then through doing research and learning things online, I've learned like, oh, this is why you have an AC. This is why you have a DP. This is why you have a gaffer. This is why you have a sound engineer. Like, this is the reason why these roles exist. And so, that's one of those areas where I'm like, film school would have probably taught me what these roles were and would have like kind of given me a heads up, like, hey, when you go on set, you might want to bring these people for this thing.
Yeah, and I think that point of reevaluation is super important because that's something I also do after every job. I'll kind of I love going through the footage and just exactly what you were saying, just pointing out, man, I wish I maybe moved in just a tiny bit here. I wish I chose a different focal length here. I wish this light would have maybe wrapped in and maybe brought the intensity down, shifted the whole nine. So I think that's also another very important skill set to kind of reiterate upon yourself, is just having that self-critiquing mode where you can just kind of reevaluate and
100%. I think that's the only way you can get better,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And not only doing that yourself, but again, I always preach about finding a mentor. So not only reevaluating yourself, but also maybe showing that to a mentor, see what they think, maybe something they would have done differently. A lot of times I'll have people ask me, oh, here's a frame, here's an interview I did. What could I have, how would have you done it? Or how would you, I'm lighting this scene, I'm lighting this interview, whatever, how would you do it? And maybe I'll give my 2 cents. And again, everyone has different workflows, so I'm not saying that like whatever I do is just always right. But I would also say finding a mentor would also probably help with that a lot.
Yeah, that's the one thing I didn't have on my journey. I didn't really have a mentor per se, but I definitely had I would always talk to my clients. And I would ask them, like, after the video was out, I'd come back to them and ask them, like, hey, what did you think? Like, did it work? Why did it work? Why don't you think this worked? And I didn't take anything personal at the time, like, I mean, even now, like, I try not to take most things personally because at the end of the day, you're offering a service to people and you just want that service to be as good as possible. And so, I'm always looking for feedback. And that was actually one of the big things I loved about YouTube, especially when I was just starting out, was I learned so much from my comment section. Like, I would put out a video and I would say something and someone would come back and be like, that's great, but you also could have done this, 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 and this, and it would have been so much easier. And I would be like, whoa, didn't know that. And so, like, even now, like, I like to really look at my YouTube as a conversation, like, when I intro my videos, I say create a fam because it's a family. And there's been so many creators who have hopped into the comments and given me suggestions, given me updates and taught me how to fix things or even fact checked me when I said something incorrect. Little things like that. Like, that's one of the things I've loved the most about YouTube. The comment section can be dicey sometimes, but
Yeah.
if you go into it with the right mindset, and you also can, you got to have a strong chin sometimes. It can be a place of learning too, because there are some very, talented creators who just don't have YouTube channels, but they go into the comment section and they give their feedback. And if you can go into it with an open mind, you can look at it. And it doesn't mean you have to take everything they say to heart or even, choose to adapt it, but it's just another thought that's out there.
Yeah, I found the comment section can definitely be a very polarizing place, and I find that I'll take what anyone has to say with a grain of salt, but that's also interesting too. Like when you are starting out, I like what you said about you almost using the comment section, as your mentor, quote unquote. So. I think that's really interesting. And then kind of moving forward to kind of current day stuff, what kind of stuff are you working on now?
So right now I'm actually in like a transition. So I don't do much real estate at all, actually.
Yep.
Most of it I'm actually like subcontracting out. So I still have a couple real estate agents who still just call me because we've just been doing it for years. But a lot of that's being subcontracted out to other shooters. And then I have an editor that works with me. And so he will edit all the real estate stuff just so we can make sure that the look is the same and that the feel for the videos are the same. But most of what I do now is primarily working direct B2B stuff or working with agencies here in the Houston area. And so a lot of that is, longer projects that take, 2-3 months to complete. There's a little bit more pre-production, more back and forth on the editing side of things. But the transition that we're currently working through is kind of scaling back even more on the commercial projects and being like super, super selective on which ones we want to take, because we've been going more full time into YouTube. I look at YouTube as a awesome platform for community and for teaching and engaging. But it also kind of gives me the freedom because there is some financial stability that's coming from YouTube that allows me to be very selective with the commercial clients that I take, because I always find that like there's like this balance I'm always walking with commercial work where I would take a project even though I wasn't like really inspired by the project or motivated by the project. The bag looked good, so I was like, all right, we'll do it because, money. And I found that like I wasn't even trying on some of them. Like I did a project not too long ago that like it's done and the client loves it. I hate it. Like I don't enjoy it at all. And it's just because I wasn't creative in it, but I got the check, and so I guess it was fine. But like for me, YouTube allows me to be creative, and that's the whole reason why I picked up a camera to begin with. I wanted to be creative and shoot my dance videos and shoot things that I wanted to shoot. And so now I'm trying to get my business to that next level, to where we're focused on creating content for ourselves and content that we want to create as a company. And then we still take on commercial projects, but we're just way more selective. And now we're actually getting to that point to where, a client calls us and we want to know what the project is about and decide if we're going to take it based off of the subject matter and how the video wants to be done, not just based on the budget and if they can afford us or not. So it allows us to be a little bit more selective.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective to have, because I feel like I'm the opposite, to where like YouTube for me has always been secondary, and I've always just focused on my regular cinematography work. But and it seems as though that like always, whenever I follow like filmmakers on YouTube and stuff like that, they're like a full-time filmmaker, and then they start making YouTube videos. It seems that like once they get a taste of that like good YouTube money, it seems to just kind of shift a little bit. I feel like Potato Jet is in that kind of world right now, and now I don't know how much I don't know how much actual commercial film production stuff he's actually doing, but I know he's doing very, very, very well on YouTube. So it's an interesting perspective there.
Yeah, I mean, so I was kind of in the same boat that you were in. I was, I would do commercial work and commercial work and commercial work. And then when commercial work got kind of slow, I'd go heavy on YouTube. And then once commercial work picked back up, my YouTube would slow back down because I was focusing on commercial work. And I did that for 2 years. And I think that's one of the reasons why my channel is where it is right now, and why I've like seen like this like kind of like highs and lows, like these flows, because I can only do so much at a time. But I will say that like just in the last year, so obviously, COVID happened, and I learned like in a matter of 2 phone calls that like $20,000 can just disappear. Like I had projects lined up, I had gigs ready to go, and just like boom, it was gone. The money was gone, the deals were off. And they were like some of my biggest jobs, and with some pretty like, clients that I've been working with for a little while. But just because of no fault of my own, it could just, disappear. And luckily at the time I had my YouTube channel. And so I was able to really dive into that and to figure out ways to creatively monetize the channel. And it helped. Like it literally is the only reason why I made it through that season, financially. That and obviously savings, but because of YouTube, I was able to really understand that like I can make my own schedule, I can create what I want to create. I think a lot of filmmakers get into this craft because they enjoy the process of telling a story visually, but a lot of times I think we sacrifice the stories that we tell for financial reasons. And for me, YouTube just allows me to still tell the stories that I want to tell. I'm not saying that I'm giving up, commercial work by any means. I thoroughly enjoy doing commercial works because a lot of times it brings me ideas that I would have never thought about doing. And it, gives me access to new locations and new people and just different things, which I still enjoy doing a lot. But I think by having YouTube as a primary and commercial as a secondary, it allows me to be very selective about the commercial work that I do. So that way, when I'm doing it, I don't feel like I'm obligated to do it, but I know it was more of a decision that I wanted to do this project. And so when I go into it, with more excitement, and I'm creatively excited about making this project as good as I can possibly do it. And so it's not even like, trying to meet my clients' expectations, but it's about meeting my own expectations and knowing what I want this project to be. And it just kind of helps with conversations like that. So I definitely think that, YouTube and doing YouTube full time as a filmmaker, I see why a lot of them do it, because there's just so much fun and you have so much more freedom in it. Not only just in your schedule, but just creatively, because you can make what you want to make. If you want to talk about a certain camera, talk about it. If you want to talk about lighting, talk about it. I mean, you just kind of have that flexibility.
Yeah, in that sense, it gives you a lot more for, like, because if you're already a freelancer, you already generally have a good amount of free time, depending on your workload. But, and then you transition over to YouTube, you have even more freedom in terms of the content you want to create. And really quick, I want to bring up a question by Volume Lux. He had a good question when we were talking about client stuff. His question was, have you ever caught yourself being rude to a client when getting bad feedback on something? So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that.
So I always take 24 hours on all feedback. It's kind of been like a rule that I've always had. So I let all clients know that, like, on feedback, expect a 48-hour turnaround or 48-hour wait before you get a response. And that's because, like, one, initially, like, I took a lot of things personally. Like, if they said, like, oh, I don't like this, or oh, I don't like that, I initially thought about it as a term of, like, I don't like you. But I learned, like, a couple years ago, especially once I was really getting into the commercial stuff and a lot of the agency stuff, is that, like, they're not really thinking about the video the same way we think about the video. They're just thinking about, like, what the video is going to do. So, like, if the video's job is to sell a widget, they're looking at the video solely from the perspective of, is this part of the video going to help us or hurt us when it comes to selling that widget? They don't care creatively one way or another. And that's really the way that, like, most clients are about the video. Their video is really just the solution to solving a problem that they have. And so all they want is that solution. And so when they don't like something in the video, they just, they give you, the feedback, and it's not anything personal. The 24 hours for me is so that, like, I can look at it, assess it, think about it, give myself some time, sleep on it, come back the next day and see if I can see it with a clearer mindset. And I typically find that that helps a lot. The other thing is, like, something that me and my editor, we talk about it all the time, but we, like, when we send the first draft, we just have, like, this saying, and it's like, don't fall in love with the edit. Like, it's just a mental note. Like, when we're working with clients, we always just tell ourselves, like, don't fall in love with the edit, because at the end of the day, like, they could choose to change, like, your favorite shot. And if you're, like, hooked into that shot and you're in love with it, it's going to hurt a lot more when they tell you to cut it out. But at the end of the day, you're providing them that service. The other thing that we also work on is just, like, we can make our own director's cut. So, like, I've done this with other projects where a client will ask for something and we're just like, oh, that's such a bad idea. And then we'll give them our creative expertise in a solution and tell them why maybe they don't want to do that. And if they still come back and say, nah, we want it, then we make a note and we're like, okay, cool. Let's save our version now. And then we'll make a duplicate version of the project, and then we'll make edits on that duplicate version, knowing that we'll have our own director's version when the project's done. So that's kind of the way that I balance getting negative feedback. But I will say that, like, really solid pre-production has saved me from really getting any negative feedback. I don't really get much negative feedback anymore because we do so much pre-production and we charge for it. But we do so much pre-production on client projects now that there's no surprises. Like, when we're shooting, there's no surprises. When the edit comes out, we shot what we needed for the edit because there was no surprises. We knew exactly what it was going to be like, from, music to design to theme and lighting, and all those things are all handled through pre-production. So clients at this point are not really surprised with the end product when they get it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting relationship to navigate, like, whether it's from the client or the agency, because sometimes they'll always, like, have their idea of what they want to be like, oh, okay, especially if it's like just a normal business that, like, wants a commercial and they're like, okay, this is our idea, we want this. And then, like, you're thinking about it and you're like, well, like, that wouldn't necessarily, I don't think, suit your goals. So it's like, one quote that I always kind of refer back to is that you want to inspire them with your brilliance. It's like, even though if they might have this certain idea, they might be kind of really hooked on this certain idea, maybe kind of inspire them on why maybe going another route would be better for that. And also regarding, feedback and stuff like that, it's really tough, and especially what you were saying when you were talking about not falling in love with the edit. And I think that's precisely why DP shouldn't be editors, is because a lot of times we'll get so hooked into this shot or this sequence or this way you lit something, and then you'll be so hooked onto it, you'll throw it in the edit, and you'll be like, okay, this one's non-negotiable, this one's staying in because I shot it and it looks good. But it comes down to the point to where, like, if it doesn't suit the story or doesn't suit the purpose that you're trying to fulfill, then you're shooting yourself in the foot, and it's just a bad time. So,
yeah, I think that's another one of those areas where I learned a lot from YouTube, because like YouTube will show you real quick that like what you think is awesome isn't awesome.
and I
You know, you start looking at your analytics and you start seeing people drop off at a certain part, and you're like, what? I thought that cinematic sequence was amazing, and like people clicked off, and it's like, nah, people don't care about you walking through the park in slow motion. Like, so it's like
Preach.
little things like that. I think YouTube is really like, thickened up my skin quite a bit. Cause I'm constantly getting that feedback and that real time feedback. And even if people aren't telling me, the data is showing it to me that we're
I like that.
like, you don't have to tell me that my video sucked. Like, the data shows that you clicked off at 15 seconds in. Like, okay, I get it. So, it's things like that I think has really thickened me up. But like those little nuggets that I was giving earlier are just kind of how we do it when it comes to dealing with like clients. And I feel like it's like I systematize as much as I possibly can, so that way there's very little emotion in what we do. Like, this is one of the reasons why I don't shoot weddings, is because weddings are very emotional and a lot of the decisions are emotionally charged. And I just like working in commercial because it's typically not very emotional. It's just very logical. It's very logistical. Like, cut this shot out because it's the wrong logo or something like that. Like, it's just logic. It's not like an emotionally charged decision.
Well, I think so. I mean, ultimately it depends, because like if you watch some of these ads from the Super Bowl, and like this happened at least 2 or 3 times where we were all kind of huddled around the couch watching these Super Bowl ads, and we're watching this like feel good piece, and it's like, oh man, what is it, like, what movie am I watching? And then at the end, like the Jeep logo comes up, and it's like, what the heck is that? This was an ad for a Jeep. What am I watching?
Yeah.
So
I'm
I
not saying
think
we don't do emotional videos. It's the decisions behind, like, so like for example, like they want certain music because they want to like have a certain emotion tied to it. So they're not just saying like, oh, I want to use, dubstep because I like dubstep. A lot of the decisions are logistical. They're like, no, we're not going to use dubstep because we want this to be a tearjerker. So let's use something slower. So that's kind of what I mean by saying logistical. Now, a lot of the videos we do are very emotional. I mean, like, the goal is like sometimes to make people cry, like, and we try to hit you quick. But I will say that like in those, like the decisions that are being made from edit standpoints and like what the agencies are wanting, they're just wanting it for a very like a reason that they can explain to us. And if we do get a note and we're like, okay, we saw this note, we're not really sure why you want this, like, can we get a reason behind it? Typically, if they don't have one, and like we have that conversation with them, they are like pretty quick to be like, we're not really sure why we want that. And then they just back down. Or if they're just like, we don't know, we just want it, then we're just like, all right. Like, then there's no, like, nothing can fall back on us. We just like to have those conversations up front.
Yeah, and then ultimately it just comes back down to like, again, inspiring them with your brilliance. But in those cases, like, yes, sometimes these decisions are non-negotiable. So if the client wants it, client's paying for it, like, okay, like I'll do my best to try to persuade you. But if it's not happening, then hey, it's not happening. But I also want to roll back in terms of YouTube. I really liked how you're talking about how you use YouTube has kind of leveled the playing field, and I liked how you mentioned that the metrics are also a good indicator in terms of your, that you use that as a feedback tool. So regarding video ideas and subject matter, like how do you go about planning for new content?
So we have certain videos that like we create, and we kind of like use like the TV term like bottle episodes. So first we have like bottle episodes. They're videos that we know we can make real easy and we can get them out. We're not riding any trends or any waves or anything like that. These are a lot of times like, business related videos, or I talk about my experiences, my stories, things like that. And these are just videos that we can kind of pump out. It allows the channel to stay alive and helps feed the algorithm, because it's a hungry beast that is constantly asking for more. So we have those type of videos. So we classify those as bottle episodes. But then like our main videos that we try to take our time on and we spend a lot of effort and stuff are videos that we find that just work well for the channel. And so we ride waves and trends, but not just like trends in general, but we ride trends that work well within like my channel. So like for example, my channel started doing really well with black magic content, and I realized it. I saw the numbers, the analytics, everything just said black magic, go in. And so I found that like, a lot of people, the way they consume YouTube is very binging. It's the same way they consume Netflix or anything else. Like we're creatures of binging content now. And so I try to create content that you can watch one video, and then after that video is done, I think, okay, if somebody enjoyed that video, what would they want to see next? And then I try to create that next video. And then I think, okay, if someone watched that video, what would they want to see next? So like an example of a way I did that. So recently I purchased the Red Komodo, and it was like a dream camera of mine. I've always wanted to own a Red. I bought it logistically knowing that I did not need it, but that I just wanted it. That's it. And I know that's going to rub people the wrong way, but it's me, my life, my money. I can do what I want. Um, but I bought that camera, and then I also bought the C70, and I realized that through analytics and everything else that there was just more drive for information on the C70. And so I made 2 videos about the C70. And then to test that a little bit further, I made a video comparing the C70 versus the Komodo, just to see which way the channel was really kind of leaning. And the comments were just filled up with stuff about the C70. And I noticed that just like I had more engagement around the time when I talked about the C70. And so for my channel right now, the same way I did with the Black Magic, I've learned that there's an audience out there that wants to know more about the C70, that are interested in the C70. And so actually just last week, I got a chance to go out and shoot with a FX6, which I know you are very hands-on and very knowledgeable about. But I could basically take one of my cameras. I could either bring the Komodo or I could bring the C70 and kind of compare it to the FX6. And I decided to take the C70 because that's basically what all the analytics have been showing me, was that people wanted to know more about the C70. And if I was going to compare it to an FX6 or compare one of my cameras to the FX6, the C70 was going to be the one that would get just more engagement, more traction, more views, the whole 9. And so really that's the way I kind of look at my channel, is I think, okay, if someone enjoyed this video and the analytics shows me that they did, then what would be the next episode in like a series? So that way when someone watches one and they're binging my content at this point, what's the next thing they're going to want to watch? And then what's the next thing they're going to want to watch? And I found that that's a good way to be successful on the channel and to really grow subscribers. But also knowing that every so often I'm going to have to throw in a bottle episode, because those gear related camera videos, they take a lot of time and they can be difficult to kind of just pump out as quickly as the algorithm wants it.
Yeah. And then really quick, you said you spent a little bit of time with the FX6. Can you give a one-two punch on your findings?
It is a dope camera. I mean, I don't know if I need 2 punches. It's a dope camera. It's fantastic. For me, I am so invested on EF lenses and Canon lenses in general that it would make it very difficult to make a switch over to it, just because the Sony ecosystem is so different and E-mount lenses are not cheap. And I tried to jump to Sony at one point, but it was the cost of the lenses that kind of kept me from going full throttle. And because I'm already so invested in Canon, but the FX6 is, I mean, it's a dope camera. I can't really say anything wrong with it. Maybe the body's a little too long to like throw on like a gimbal or something like that. You probably need like a Crane 3S for it, or you have to go big with like a Movi. Maybe the only big drawback on it, but it's so light. I mean, I'm pretty sure somebody's figured out how to balance it on like a Ronin or something like that. So that's probably the only drawback on it. But other than that, I mean, the variable ND and auto exposing ND was like something that when I saw it happening, I was like, why is it doing this? And we were
Black
shooting at
magic right there.
sunset. It was some serious magic. I'm not really sure how it was doing it, and it was doing it very well. Like I said, we were shooting at sunset at one point with it, and I mean, my C70, I'm over here like dropping NDs and picking up NDs and adjusting ISO, trying to get the whole thing to like properly expose. But yeah, man, the Sony was, I mean, phenomenal. So yeah, great camera.
We'll definitely be excited to look forward to that video. And really quick, I want to bounce
Dropping
to the
on
chat.
Tuesday.
Okay, there you go. Tuesday. Now we got something to look forward to. Really quick from the chat volume, you got some good questions here. I'm actually going to save these for a little bit later in actually the next section. And then hello, Camille from the Netherlands. So I also, running back to YouTube, do you ever have difficulty navigating the balance between creating content that you want versus the content that people want to see?
Yeah, 100%. I find that like YouTube is like it's a weird platform because like you get real-time feedback. Like, so for example, like I like making business content. I love it because as far as I'm concerned, like if you're a freelance filmmaker, like you probably should be like running your business more like 60-40, and that's being really like lenient, like 60% focusing on the business side, 40% working on the filmmaking creative side. And honestly, you'd probably be better off doing more like a 70-30 split, focusing on business. Just because like as much as a freelancer wants to be creative, if you're trying to do it as a career and there's no money coming in, like I said earlier, like that's a hobby. And then it becomes a very expensive hobby. And so I would love to talk more about business on my channel. But I found that like those videos just do not get the same type of traction. Now, that being said, the people who do engage with those videos, I find that, you know, I get really great comments. You know, people are saying, thank you so much for the gems, and they're taking the content and they're using it and they're allowing themselves to like really grow and help their business grow. And so I get a lot of great feedback from it, but I can look at like my reach, like how many people are YouTube itself showing the video to. And it's just not the same in comparison to when I do, you know, gear related videos. So it's kind of like a Trojan horse thing that I try to do every now and again, where like I'll drop like gear video, knowing that like YouTube and the way the algorithm works, that if people consume my content, they will, you know, they'll watch the video about the Komodo, or they'll watch the video about the C70. And then if they hit the subscribe button off that video, the next video that I post, YouTube will show it to them, no matter what it is, just because that's the way the algorithm works. If they recently subscribed to your channel, YouTube wants to show them the next video that you put out. And so that's when I'll try to drop a business video, hoping that I can, you know, motivate and inspire, because there's so many like, you know, hills and valleys on this journey. And with my channel, especially with the business stuff, like I'm just trying to help people like navigate things that like will help them, because like I didn't have a mentor. Like I said earlier, like I'm self-taught, so I didn't go to school for this. Like I don't have a college degree or anything like that, but I have been able to build a successful, you know, freelance business along with, you know, a semi-professional, you know, now going more for professional YouTube business. And I'm just trying to help as many people who are on that same journey, who are kind of like me and they can't afford to, you know, go to school, or they can't afford to, you know, get a mentor, because I understand like some people will actually charge you to be a mentor. And I just want to just, you know, try to put as much free content out there as possible. Now, that being said, I do have paid courses as well. And those are just way more in depth. And that just kind of helps with the time that it took to make those. But like at the end of the day, like that's the reason why, even though I have paid courses, I still keep putting out free content on YouTube on a weekly basis, because I'm just trying to help as many people as I can.
Yeah, totally. And I think, you know, when you're talking about the business content you like creating, you know, there's a huge void of that just in general. And even in college, that was one of my biggest complaints about film school, or even high school, any school, they like never teach you about business at all. And it's like, they don't like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming out of film school. Like, okay, how do I do my taxes? Like, what the, like, that should not, like, I don't know. I feel like, especially just in the general school system, like things are just kind of not, the efforts are just not being put in the right place. But, yeah, no, it's interesting navigating like the content that you want to make versus what people actually want to see.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, some people don't know that they need to focus on the business stuff, so they don't look for that content. But
Until they
everybody
need
likes
to.
a gear, so you know, they
Yeah.
see a cool camera and a thumbnail, and they're clicking on it. So,
Exactly. And then when going off of the monetization thing too, it's like, because I actually just recently started a Patreon, and I offer like a a mentorship level and stuff like that too. So it's valuable for some people. And then one of my goals actually for this year is I want to at some point I've always wanted to make like some kind of lighting course, like kind of the way I approach lighting, because people are always asking me like how I approach lighting and stuff like that. So it'd be cool to like bundle up some kind of course for that.
I think you should do it, man. I really do. I mean, and even if it's like, the way I look at like courses is like, sometimes it just helps you from having to like watch a million videos. Cause like, if you had a lighting course, I would have totally done that. Cause I think like I said, I dived heavy into your YouTube channel, and I'm watching multiple videos and like trying to connect dots and figure out where gaps are. Cause I'd watch one video and you'd brief over one thing, but then you'd talk about something else. So then I have to go find another video to try to figure out what was that other thing you were
Yeah.
talking about. And so I think courses are great. And, like, I mean, I tried Patreon at one point. It just wasn't for me from a monetization standpoint. Like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't allocate the time to it. But I think that like anybody on YouTube who's creating content, especially when they're giving out so much great knowledge for free for most of the time, like there's nothing wrong with monetizing that in some fashion, even if it just allows you to be able to keep doing what you're doing. Because I don't think we'll ever really see like all the impact that like, channels like ours are going to have on, people in their lives and their livelihoods. But I know that it's, for the most part, most of it's all positive. So I think it's awesome. Whatever way you can help make that even, go further from monetization or whatever, I say it's worth it.
Absolutely. And kind of scrolling back to when we're talking about creating content, Sam actually in the chat has actually a really good question. Sam is asking, what do our work hours look like from managing and creating YouTube videos in between client work?
Yeah. So, the way I used to do it, it's not really the case anymore, but the way I used to do it was I would do all my client work first, and then whatever time I had left, I'd put it into YouTube. And this year I decided to flip that. Like, I decided that if my focus is YouTube, that needs to come first. And so when I wake up every morning, roughly around 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and I have a couple hours before my kids get up and I have to start taking them off to school and whatnot. And so those first couple hours I just dedicate to YouTube, whether that's coming up with concept, editing a video. I have an editor now, so sometimes it's like me tweaking stuff or just working on a script or whatever. I take my first couple hours of the day where I'm at my most creative and I'm at my best, and I put that towards YouTube. And then after I get my kids off to school, I have a to-do list. I am a list-driven person. I have a whiteboard right over here that's got like a
Same.
massive to-do list, and I write down everything that I need to do, and I knock off all of my stuff first, and then I kind of put the rest of my time and attention and energy into the stuff I need to do for my clients. And for me, I know that like, maybe that's not right for everybody, but I want to give my best to my work where I see my my career going. And so I do that. But then also like I set really realistic expectations for my clients. So they're not expecting same day turnarounds on edits. Like, they're expecting a week, 2 weeks. And like I said, I brought in an editor to help make these type of things possible. I have a producer that I work with, and she helps me a lot with pre-production and things like that. So that way I can actually focus on my YouTube. Like I said, I know I'm not maybe making as much money as I possibly can, but for me, it's an investment. by hiring these people to help take some of the commercial stuff off my plate so I can focus on building what I want to ultimately have, and that is a successful YouTube channel. And so for me, it's about just giving that my best first. And that's starting out my day with YouTube, YouTube on the mind, looking at analytics, like all those little things, even learnings, trainings, hopping into clubhouses, watching YouTube videos, things like that. Just so I can really understand the YouTube game. Because if there's one thing I've learned, and that is that YouTube and commercial are two totally different things. The way you edit, the way you tell stories, the way you engage, it's all different. And so I'm kind of learning that new language of YouTube and trying to become very fluent in it.
Yeah, that's super interesting on how you just approach that, because for me, it's just like a totally the opposite. And I'm just kind of focusing on YouTube as a secondary means. But maybe that's why my channel is so small. But honestly, I don't mind. Because I mean, I usually try to take my practical experiences from my real work and then just share them via YouTube. But one of my good buddies, Orlando, has a great question regarding, because you said you're very list centric. So what is your list on pre-pro for your YouTube videos? So what does pre-pro look like when you're kind of in the planning stages?
Yeah, so I always start off with title and thumbnail. I know that sounds like dumb or generic or whatever, but that's me. Like for me, the first thing is I've got to know my title and I've got to know my thumbnail. And if I can't think of a title or a catchy title or a good thumbnail for the video, it's not going to happen. Sometimes that's really easy. Sometimes that's as simple as FX6 versus the C70. And then like knowing I'm getting a photo of both cameras and like, boom, okay, got my title, got my thumbnail, let's go. And then from there, once I have my title and my thumbnail, then the next thing that I do is I just start writing questions that based off of the title and the thumbnail, what are people going to expect? And then what questions would they have based off those expectations? And that is primarily for me to make sure that my video is going to go the right route to meet people's expectations. Because when people's expectations aren't met, I find that that's typically when you're going to get massive dislikes or people who click off in the first couple seconds. So after I make that list, then the next thing I look at is like, what is the purpose of this video? Like, what are people getting out of it? Because once I know what that is, that has to be delivered in the first 15 seconds, or the setup for that needs to be delivered in the first 15 seconds. That's kind of one of those areas where I learned that like a cool cinematic sequence is awesome. And like some filmmakers may appreciate that. But on YouTube, if someone clicks on your title and your thumbnail, they need to know in the first 15 seconds or even less if possible that like, okay, I'm giving you my time. Am I going to get my time's worth out of this video? And so as much as I would love to start every video with like a really awesome B-roll sequence and, stuff that I think looks visually stunning, I found that like in the first couple seconds, I need to tell you why you're here and let you know that like what you're expecting, you're gonna get. And here is like the purpose of this video. From there, it just becomes like working out the video, like kind of like the outline. Some videos I do script them, especially if they're super technical. I'll script them, and I have actually on my camera right now, I have a permanent teleprompter that's set up at all times. And so I'll do that. Sometimes if it's like something that I know, like in like really internally, and I don't need like to actually script it out, I won't, just because that'll save me, an hour or two, but then I'll make sure that I come up with all the bullet points. Once the A-roll is done and planned out for, then I will then plan out all the B-roll shots, and I kind of make a little shot list. I don't storyboard or anything like that. I just make a quick shot list. And then for every idea of a shot, so like when it comes to camera B-roll, if we're getting B-roll of a camera, I'll say like, all right, we need at least, 10 shots of the camera, 3 close-ups, 3 mids, 3 wides, something like that. Just however I feel like I need to do that. And I'll make my kind of a shot list from there. And then now that I have my list all done, now it just becomes knocking it out, just one thing at a time. Shoot the A-roll. Typically I like to shoot my A-roll first, so I know how long my video is going to be. I know, what content I'm talking about. So then that way I can make sure I get adequate amount of B-roll to kind of cover that up. Cause I like to make sure that my videos are visually, appealing, cause I am a filmmaking channel. So I don't want it to look, bad. It's hard to take advice from a filmmaking channel
Right.
when it doesn't look
It's
good.
probably pretty important.
It's a little important for our industry. But yeah, so I try to do that, and then hopefully from there, make a video that people want to see. I mean, that's kind of the hardest part about YouTube is like you'll spend all this time, you make this video, and then you just hope that people are gonna click on it and watch it and want to see it. And so I really look at my algorithm or I look at the algorithm, I look at my analytics to make sure that like before I put all this time into a video, that it is something that people are gonna want to look at and want to watch. But then like sometimes you just have those anomalies where you make this awesome video, you think it's great, and like nobody watches it. And then you like make this like subpar video that you're like, whatever. Like I just need to feed the algorithm. And then that's the video that takes off. And you're just like sitting there like, I don't know what just happened, but whatever. Let it run.
Hmm. So let me ask you this, and you might have just answered it, but when you're like yourself are consuming content on YouTube, like what are some of the things that you are looking for in other creators that, of other channels that you're subscribed to that kind of keep bringing you back?
So for me, it's a lot of it is actually like the person themselves. So like something that I've been trying to do more on my channel, even because of the content that I consume, is like really being more personal and having a conversation with the audience and being more like telling my story and my journey. I found that like for me, just where I'm at, like I don't really watch a lot of camera channels. Like most of the time I don't watch a lot of camera channels because a lot of them are just recycling existing information, and it's very just, talking head, here is what I know. And I like to go on a journey. I like to know people's story. I like to know like why do you shoot the way you shoot, or what was the purpose of this experiment or whatever. And so that's something that I've been doing a lot with my channel, is trying to make it a little bit more story driven, whether I'm telling the story of like my experience working with a certain camera versus just telling you like, hey, here's the camera, here are the specs, and here is what I can do with it. Like I want to really explain like, okay, here was my journey with this camera, or here's why I bought this camera, or why it works for me, and making it a little more story driven. And I found that like that's what keeps me on most videos all the way through. Also something that I learned with most of the videos that I consume. So I don't really, like I said, I don't watch a lot of filmmaking channels, and I kind of do that on purpose because I like to see like what are other things that engage with me. And a lot of the times it's just being unique to themselves. And so with my channel, that's something that I'm always like striving for and trying to fix, like how can I be unique to me? Like what are things that like that I have experienced or my expertise that I can talk about versus, just talking about generic things that, anybody could do. Like I look at a lot of the bigger YouTube channels and like no one could copy them because they are so uniquely them. And I'm just trying to figure out like for me and my channel, like what is that? And now that I'm doing YouTube more full time, I kind of have like the flexibility to actually stop and think about those things. Because initially when I was doing my channel, it was just like, just crank out videos, and people who watch will watch. But now it's more about like, what makes me uniquely me, and what do I have to offer the industry right now that no one else could offer. And I find that for most people and for myself, it's my journey, my story. It's what's worked well for me based off of my background, like not being able to go to film school, having a child young. Like those are things that I know other people are going through in their lives, and they can maybe learn some things from me based off of my past.
Yeah, and creating a lot of relatable content is really important too. Like I've had a couple people message me saying that like the cooking video or whatever that I did recently, like it's like, oh, dude, I have that coming up like in 2 weeks. So it's like, having that relatable forms of bite-sized content to consume really helps. And being able to tell those relatable stories in like your own unique voice too is definitely important. Rich, I see your question. I'm going to go ahead and leave that for this next section coming up real quick. And then really quick, I want to acknowledge Lucas over here in the chats. Says, I really want to thank you, Rob. I've learned a ton from your videos, and I love that you often come up with really good and technical explanations of things, often about things that nobody talks about. So again, it's interesting hearing your perspective too, because, when you, I mean, that's what it's ultimately about, is just sharing your experiences and what works for you, because everyone has their own path, everyone has their own journey. So, what works for some might not work for others. And just hearing the way that you approach YouTube, it sounds just absolutely a 180 from the way I approach YouTube, which is totally fine. Like it's no big deal at all. But it's very interesting hearing that perspective, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. So last kind of YouTube centered question, for those that are maybe thinking about starting a channel, like what are some of your biggest tips?
So I mean, I think that like, the simple things that you see in like all the YouTube tip videos, they are true. Like they are like good thumbnails, good titles, post consistently. That's like the top three. And like I was definitely one of those people that would hear those three and be like, okay, but what's the secret, right? And there's really not a secret. What I would tell people is that like when you do those three, so you have a good title, you have a good thumbnail, and you post consistently, you actually start getting the data accurately from your analytics to start making the decisions that are right for your channel. And if you're not doing those three, it's really hard. So like, for example, no matter how awesome your video is, no matter how great your editing is, your awesome B-roll sequence, or how like amazing your tips are, like if nobody clicks on the video because they don't like your title or they don't like your thumbnail or it doesn't engage them enough to click on it, no one will see the video. So all the hard work that you put into making your video just is a wash because no one looks at it because the title and thumbnail aren't right. So that's one of the reasons why that's like the first thing that I do. I can't do anything if I don't have that because no one's going to see it. And then as far as like the consistency posts, your audience is getting blasted with so many other videos on YouTube. I mean, at any moment, like even probably right now, like while we're doing this live stream, people probably have on their screen like 6 other videos that are like with great titles and thumbnails saying, click me, click me, click me. And, that means that you have to really like look at your analytics to figure out like what is working. And the only way to do that is by posting consistently, because when you do it, your audience gets a chance to know who you are and you can do it consistently and be like, oh, this type of thumbnail works. This type of thumbnail doesn't work. But if you let like 3 months or 6 months go between your uploads, it's hard to really judge those 2 videos side by side and to start to kind of see what works for your channel and what doesn't. And so that's where like the consistency thing comes into play, is it just allows you to really learn from your analytics to see what's working. And I tell most people like, the idea of, doing one awesome video a month, like depending on the size of your channel, you might be able to pull that off. And then that's a big swing, like that's got to be a massive swing and you got to go big. But then you also got to ask yourself, like, how will I handle it if that one swing flops? And if you're okay with that, then that's totally fine. You know what you're walking into. But if you're not okay with that, I would say that when you're first starting out, it's okay to like kind of like, it's like going to the gym. Like you're not going to have like, you're not going to build all the muscle in one workout. Like, but you got to go consistently. You got to just keep working out, go, a couple times a week. On YouTube, I would say like start out at like trying to post like 1 video a week if you absolutely can. At worst, at least 2 a month when you're first getting started. But also like forcing yourself to like complete those videos on that type of a timeline is going to make you a better creator, because you can't reflect on your past work and get better until you finish it. And so for me, that's a big reason why like I like the idea of posting 1 to 2 videos a week, is because once the video is done and it's out and it's up there, now I can look back on it, reflect, learn from it, and then take that on to the next one. But if I hold a video forever, I never really get a chance to like learn from that work. So
Yeah,
those are my little tips.
I definitely like that gym analogy, and I think I could speak for 1 or 2 other people in the chat. We'll definitely look forward to seeing your gym course and your workout routine become available. So really quick, I want to round into production and kind of the stuff where you're working on now, and to really open things up, I want to bring up this question by Rich. He's asking, What's the best way to break into making money with filmmaking? I have the gear, but finding the right clients or any at all is hard for me. Mind you, I live in a 25,000 people area. So I know you had some tips or two with reaching with client outreach, just in general, especially in regards to real estate. But how would you go about approaching this?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, when it comes to like just getting started, I tell most people go old school, talking to people like in person, figure out where they are, meet up with them, going into their establishments and, just asking to speak to the manager. I think now more than ever, it's people are so used to not getting that like personal connection that when they get it, it's kind of like they're gonna remember you. They're gonna remember who you are. And I know like when I was first starting out and I was like, I wanted to start getting some gyms underneath my belt. Like I was like, oh, I want to start shooting for some CrossFit gyms. I literally drove around my neighborhood or like my little community and went into like 4 or 5 different CrossFit gyms and got 2. Like I booked 2. Like that was it. I booked 2 jobs just going into those gyms. And the kind of thing that happens with this business, at least I found that it happens to me, is that if you do a good job, that person is more likely to want to rehire you, but then also business owners know other business owners. They run in a pack. Because kind of how like they say like successful people hang out together, like business owners hang out together. And so when one of them finds out that somebody did a video, they're like, oh, who's your guy? And now you get a nice little referral there. And I find that works out a lot. I mean, you do have to figure out like what is it that you want to do. Figure out like what type of videos you want to do, what type of industry you want to go into. And when you're just getting started, like I actually just actually shot a video about this already. We just haven't released it yet, but we're talking about, when is it okay to shoot for free versus when you shouldn't be shooting for free. And if you're just getting started out, like, if it's an ego thing or whatever, like sometimes you may have to check it, but like it's okay to shoot certain videos for free, especially if you're just getting started. The only tip that I have for things like that is like, make sure they know what your video's value actually is. So still submit an invoice, but like have on there like what the actual price of this video is and that they're getting like 100% discount for like a starter's discount or something like that. So that way when they want you again or they refer you out to someone else, they have a monetary value for what they're getting for free. Because when people don't have that, they'll ask for a million edits and things like that because they're like, oh yeah, this is all for free. And it's like, well, actually you're getting a $6,000 video for free. I'm just doing this for you as a favor. And it's also a favor for me for the experience. But if they know the value of it, they will appreciate you way more. So then when you go back to them to do another job and you offer them a similar video and you say, okay, this one's going to be 6,000, they're not shocked by it. They knew the number. They saw the number already. There's no surprise there. So, I mean, those are like just some of the quick tips that I have when it comes to reaching out to clients. I don't like emails. I don't like cold calls. People are just too busy today and those don't typically work. I would say that like with real estate, that can work. And that's just because realtors live and die by their phones. That's just the nature of their business. So if you call them, they're going to answer. But just also know they're getting a lot of calls throughout the day. So I always tell people like, if you're reaching out to somebody brand new for the first time, do it early. Do it early in the day when they still have the tolerance to deal with, that type of a call. Don't wait till after lunch because after lunch, they don't want to talk to you. No business owner wants to talk to anybody after lunch. They're tired. They're ready to be done with the day. Last thing you want to do is like vet a new lead or something like that. So a couple tips that helps.
Yeah, no, that is exactly how I approach invoicing too, especially when I'm trying to negotiate with, it's a client or a producer, whatever. And it's like, here's my rate and here's what I normally charge. And a lot of times what they don't understand is that I'm pretty flexible with rates. So whenever I do give someone like a reduced rate or a discount or anything, I'll be sure to mark that down on each line item. Like, hey, like this is exactly how much you're getting off. So then they look at the number, they're like, oh, whoa, they took off like, 20, 25, 30, or however many percent, if it's 100, if you're, you're doing your video for free. So getting that sense of value is really important too when you're in the negotiation process.
100%. Yeah, I mean, just in the negotiation process, just one other little nugget. I always tell people, like, negotiate work, not price. So, like, if you are negotiating with people and they're asking you for a lower rate or something like that, like I mentioned before, we do pre-production, we do production, we do post-production. And like one of the big reasons why I've really started pushing pre-production is because, like, there's a lot of work in pre-production that you can negotiate to get the rate down, but it doesn't affect your value. So, like, for example, location scouting. Like, if a client comes to me and they're like, oh, well, we can't afford that, then I'll be like, all right, well, we can take, 10% off of the pre-production, but you gotta lock in the location, and we'll send you the documents, but you gotta get the location permit signed. And like, now they're paying less, but you're also doing less, versus you, like, just doing all the same work for a cheaper price, because now mentally for them, you are cheaper. And the next time they want to hire you, they're going to expect the same thing. But I find this happens a lot when I negotiate like that and I put the pre-production on them. They will then come back to me the next time and they'll be like, hey, we don't want to do the pre-production. We'll pay the pre-production rate because that sucks.
Like, okay, I get it.
We don't want to deal with all the paperwork.
Like,
we understand why you charge what you charge. Like, you handle it. So negotiate your work, not your price, and make sure that all items are lined out on your invoice. It just makes it better for you long term and in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, those are absolutely great tidbits of information. And then in regards to more of your production work, as you mentioned, and as mostly everyone knows, you recently got into the Komodo. So I want to ask you, what made you to decide to get into that camera? I know you mentioned it was a sort of a dream camera for you. What were some of the other factors, and how's that investment panning out for you?
So for me, so before the Komodo and before the C70, I shot a lot with the Blackmagic. But my main editor and my editing software of choice, and then my editor, we both edit in Final Cut Pro 10. Like I mentioned earlier, I worked at Apple. I got trained in Final Cut 10, so I'm very proficient in it. I edit very quickly in it. I know all the keyboard shortcuts. I've added a couple extra keyboard shortcuts. So for me at this point, trying something new is a little more difficult. I've been dabbling a lot in DaVinci lately. So I'm loving that software, especially from a coloring standpoint. But for the most part, I do most of my cutting in Final Cut. And Blackmagic never released a patch for Blackmagic Raw to work inside of Final Cut, which is one of the big reasons why when the Komodo came out and I could access Red Raw at an affordable rate, it just spoke to me. Also, I've always loved just like the color science and then the flexibility with Red Code Raw. So that was the reason why I jumped into that. On top of that, I had a client project actually come up right around the time that I was really thinking about investing in it, and the project itself more than paid for the camera. So it was kind of like I could rent the camera or I could buy it now because I've always wanted it. And I do believe in renting cameras. I've rented tons of cameras, Reds, Alexas, you name it. But there's something about owning a camera that allows you to like really dive into it. Like, you can dive into the settings. You can shoot stuff for fun and figure it out and figure out how to properly expose it and learn all the insights on it. And the Komodo was the easiest way for me to fully start to understand Red and Red Raw and start to unlock it and figure out workflows and things like that for it, because it was at kind of an affordable price point. Now, that being said, all the peripherals around the Komodo, I kind of already owned. So as far as like the way I power it, the batteries, I already own those. I also have V-mount setups for it. I have that stuff already. Obviously, it has no NDs or anything like that, but I already run map boxes. As far as like memory goes, it uses CFast cards. I have a couple of those laying around. So like, it wasn't as much of an investment for me, like it can be for someone who's like never shot cinema before, who's having to jump in and they think they're buying a $6,000 camera, but really it's going to be like a $10,000 or $12,000 camera. For me, it just wasn't that. It was easy for me to just basically pluck the box of the Blackmagic out of the system and then just kind of slide the Komodo into its place, and I was able to get up and running like just in a matter of seconds.
And I'm curious, what were some of your biggest learning curves, now transitioning into Red? Obviously, a much different workflow than most other cameras. I mean, I imagine it's a little bit similar to the Pocket because it's a tiny little body and it doesn't have any mainly similar workflow. So, like for you, what were some of the big learning curves with transitioning into the Komodo?
One of the biggest ones was just like how you expose it. I mean, obviously you don't use ISO the same way. So ISO is not real with the Komodo. It's kind of weird to think about it that way, but like when you set your ISO, it's not really adjusting your exposure. It's just adjusting your readout on what you're seeing on your screen. So you are really trying to dial in your exposure with your aperture and your NDs and your lighting, obviously. Like that's where most of it is coming from. So it is a different way of doing things. So like when I was taking a lot of the classes online on the Red, like you set your ISO to 800 and then you basically have to look at your exposure index on the actual screen. They're kind of like traffic lights on there in order to make sure that you're not clipping your highlights or crushing your shadows. And figuring out how to properly expose with that is definitely a challenge. But I found that like the images that I get out of it, especially when I have the ability to go in, like I said, now playing in DaVinci a lot more, being able to actually like pull those colors and knowing that I have all that detail and create things like power windows and having like just properly exposed skin tones and things like that. It's so much nicer in what I'm able to actually do with the camera. And with the Komodo being the size that it is, you can rig it up real big and make it, big enough to where you want to actually run it on an easy rig or something like that. But you can also like strip it all the way down and go handheld and just like walk down the street with it or, take it somewhere and no one's going to think it's a cinema camera. So you just have so much flexibility. I mean, like right now, it's actually on the gimbal back there. It's just on a Ronin RS2 and I can just go, I would never do this, but I could technically go shoot real estate with it. Like I could totally do that right now if I wanted to. So there's just so much flexibility with the camera and it's everything I love about the Black Magic. It just also gives me all the benefits of Red that I've wanted for a long time.
Yeah, and I like what you were saying about Resolve because I know you said you're dabbling a little bit with more Resolve. I think that's really the last part of the equation for a lot of people and is just, I think, really misunderstood by a lot of people, not because they are, choosing to not understand it, but because, the first time you jump into Resolve in the color tab, it's like, what am I in an airplane cockpit here? And with all like these wheels and dials and stuff. So I remember that's how I felt. So I do think, image acquisition is, that's the first half, and then post, knowing how to really dial in your color and grade, and not only grade, but correct and then grade, getting through your primaries and secondaries. That's what kind of really pushes for me, like in the past couple of years, I've really dived into Resolve because I that's what I mainly edit on. And so it helps that my color tab is 2 rows over. So I've been spending a lot of time in the color tab and I felt like that's what also has contributed to me leveling up a couple notches, just understanding that workflow.
Yeah, that's kind of my last step, like for me, I invested in lenses early on before I upgraded camera bodies. And then after studying your channel, actually, I went into a huge lighting deal. And before I bought my camera bodies, I invested into like new lighting kits. Like I got a bunch of stuff from Aperture and figured out diffusion and different types of diffusion, whether that was 4x or 6x, and figuring out like how do I light my subject properly. And like once I had my lenses intact, I had my lighting kit intact, I was like, okay, now let me find the best sensor I can at a price that I can afford to capture this light. And for me, that was the Komodo. And that's like, I mean, I own the C70 and I think C70 is an awesome camera. I love that camera. But when you're just talking about like which has the better sensor, for me, that's the Komodo. And so that's the reason why I bought the Komodo first. But for me, it was like, okay, now I have the sensor. So now I have lighting. I have, the lenses that I want. I have the sensor to capture that data. So between capturing the light through the lens, hitting the right sensor, but now that I have the image, now I'm learning, okay, how do I process that image? And so that's why now I'm in DaVinci learning it so I can figure out the proper way to like, okay, you captured something great, but now do something with it. And I'm learning that color is kind of that next step for me, like figuring out how to properly correct and grade my footage. So that way I can actually get what the Komodo is actually putting out there. So
Yeah, so maybe we'll have enough to lure you in and keep you on Resolve full time. So maybe in the next year or two we'll see that happen.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. No, I love it. I've switched about a year or two ago, and I haven't looked back since. I did switch back to Mac about a year ago, so I always do want to I try Final Cut again. I want to give it another chance, and I tried a couple months ago, and I couldn't wrap my head around like how it processes color. Like it asks you if you want like Rec 709 or like it was confusing for me. So I was like, all right, I'm going back to Resolve.
Yeah, I find that Final Cut is great for YouTube, just for quick turn and burn. It doesn't have to be perfect. That is why I love Final Cut. It's quick. It's so fast. It's great for that kind of stuff. But like for like I mentioned, like with the commercial stuff, we're being very selective about what we want now. And so because of that, when we do it, I want to do it right. And so that's why, the commercial stuff, I can definitely see that stuff being done all in DaVinci, but then stuff for YouTube, stuff that just needs to be turned around really fast. I could do that stuff in Final Cut and just whip it. So
Yeah, and especially all the optimizations. Like I know, people like Jonathan Morrison just praising Final Cut and just how efficient it is with transcoding and exporting, all that stuff. Like I love the zippiness and snappiness. So like I'm always curious. Like I do want to give it a try, but I found that Resolve has been more than enough for my needs and has been super powerful. And one, I can't believe it's free. So like whenever people are asking me for NLEs that they should be using, I'm like, that's my first go-to. And best
100%.
of yet,
I agree.
So and it's interesting because when you were talking about when you started to dive into lighting a little bit more, like I feel like in the past 6 months, like your quality of work has improved significantly. So I don't know if that was around that same time that you started to dive into lighting a little bit more, but at least from what I've seen on your channel, I feel like your quality of work has risen significantly. So I'm curious, were there any like resources or what other things did you start to utilize to like, well, first of all, like what are your thoughts on me saying that like within the past year that your stuff has gotten looked a lot better?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that because that's all been very intentional. If you look at my channel and you actually go back, like you said, like roughly about 6 months ago, a little bit before that, I took like a 2-month break off of YouTube and I just started studying. I kind of went into a lab and realized that like, okay, your stuff is okay, but it can be better. And so I stopped putting out content because I was like, I need to educate myself. And I found like there's like this level, like we talked about earlier. Like I feel like I went from being a sophomore to a junior on YouTube, and I found a whole new list of YouTube channels that were just like way beyond the basic stuff. Like your channel was one of those. Threefold, they're another group of guys. They have a channel. They're actually a production company, and they've been putting out like some really high quality stuff, but they're not talking about basics. It's another level. And I've been looking at a lot of that content and leveling up my own stuff and saying that like, okay, like just doing the bare minimum isn't enough. Like let's really try it and let's really put out the work. And I appreciate you saying that about my channel because I've been really trying, and your channel was one of the first ones. Like your channel showed me how important lighting was. Like I knew it. I owned a couple lights, but like, I had a 120D and a light dome, and I was like, cool, I'm doing lighting now. And I had a second 120D and I had it as a hair light, and I was like, all right, I'm fancy now. And, then I watch yours and you're talking about exposure and just like how, like if you're high key lighting or low key lighting and kind of getting proper exposure on both sides of the face and little things like that. And I'm just like, what is this new world? Like, I thought I had a 120D and I was enough. And then you're talking about HMIs and comparing HMIs versus three 300Ds. I'm just like, who needs that much power? Why do you need that much power? And you're teaching that kind of stuff in your videos. And like, it was those type of things that like really made me reevaluate the way I looked at filmmaking, because now, even though I'm not like a lighting expert, like when I talk about certain things, I know the next level. And I know that, like, okay, if I'm going to talk at this level, make sure I'm being very clear that, like, this is the level that I'm talking about, knowing that there's someone like Robert that's like up here who can take you to this level. And so if you need this, like, let me give you this. And then if there's someone better than me who can give you the next level, let that person do it. And like, that's been really, really helpful for my channel, and just kind of knowing where my lane is. Like we talked about earlier, like, what are you teaching freshmen? Are you teaching sophomores? Are you teaching juniors? Are you teaching seniors? Like, I want to make sure that like I'm teaching at my level, and that I'm really good at teaching at my level. And that if someone wants something more, let them have it. And that's the reason why I made that video where I shouted out your channel, because I know that there are people who are probably looking for that next tier, and your channel and like Threefold's channel and the Wandering DP, who can break crazy stuff down and show stuff that I could never fully understand. Like, the people need that next level too. And so I just wanted to kind of usher them you guys' way.
Well, first of all, I super appreciate that. But second of all, I also appreciate the fact that like you as an educator, like almost acknowledge that and but okay, what are the next steps that I can do to, you know, elevate my work? Because, you know, like you were saying, and how I feel about a lot of YouTubers nowadays is that, you know, they'll have this sentiment like, oh, like, you know, I have a 120D and a light dome. It's like, I'm a filmmaker, you know, which, you know, in a sense they are, but it's like that can only get you so far. And like, I'll always go back to this one like very good Reddit comment I found. It was like, if all you learn is from YouTube, then like that's the only level you'll aspire to achieve, which, you know, there's some truth to that. And, you know, that's why I'm always a big proponent for having quality information and taking information from a whole bunch of other different sources. So like I appreciate that you took the time to sit down and kind of, you know, like we were talking about, reevaluate and see, you know, how you can not only elevate your work, but elevate your education.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of trendy channels on YouTube that are great. I think they're awesome channels. I think there's a lot of great creators, and I think they're awesome for where they are. But for me, when I look at who I want to learn from, I look at their work. And, you know, a lot of times, like, you know, their work is invisible.
Right.
Or, you know, they have some awesome shots, but then you realize, you're like, wait a minute, they're in all the awesome shots. Who's shooting it? So it's like little things like that I started kind of figuring out. And so I started looking for channels who had just pure awesome work, and started trying to figure out, okay, what are they doing to create that awesome work? I want to actually learn from the person who's kind of behind the camera a little bit than the person who's always in front. And that's where like some of your videos, like when you're clearly working. So most of your stuff is like, you know, voiceovers after the fact of the job. And those are some of my favorite videos that you've done, because you're clearly doing the work. You know, it's not you in frame, you're doing the work, and you're doing the voiceover afterwards because you're actually doing it. And we get a chance to see what the behind the scenes was like. And that's why I think, like, you know, your channel is so valuable to so many. And that's kind of like some of the area where, you know, right now I talk about gear because I know gear very well. I know the specs, and I also can talk about my journey with it. But one of those areas that I want to get into more is something that you've been doing. It's like, you know, really taking people on set with you, but with me now being able to be more selective about the jobs that I do, I can bring people on sets that I actually even want to be on. Because a lot of times I don't even, like, before I took YouTube more seriously and I was just taking every commercial project I could get my hands on, there were certain sets that I didn't even want to be on. So why would I want to bring my audience on it? So that's kind of another one of those reasons why now I can be more selective. It'll actually make for better content long term.
Yeah. And again, I think that's really cool how you approach YouTube as the primary. So then you have a little bit more freedom with the freelance work. So yeah, I really enjoy that. So and finally, I want to end things and kind of our final topic. I want to talk about, you know, the two hot cameras out right now, which two of the hot cameras, the C70 and the Komodo. So first, I want to get your thoughts on like what do you like about each camera?
So I kind of said this earlier, but like as far as I'm concerned, in the $6,000 price point realm, like somewhere around there, I do think that like between Red Komodo Raw and the Komodo, it is the best sensor you can get for that price point. But that's all you're gonna get. And so if you're looking at the Komodo, you just kind of have to be like, all right, I'm paying for a sensor. Do I want that sensor? If you don't care about that sensor, then it's not the camera for you. Like having a Red has not gotten me any more jobs. I've been able to rent it out a little bit and make some extra money on the side. But other than that, like, you know, no one's looking at your Red Komodo on set being like, oh, book him for 5 more jobs. He's shooting Red. That's just doesn't happen. But then like for me, I look at like the C70 and even just my short time with the FX6 as those are just like production workhorses. Like they have everything you need almost built into them, whether that's NDs, all the video scopes. You have, you know, mapped buttons that you can customize and do what you want with them. And then they just produce a beautiful image. Like they're designed to work. You know, I look at them as like your pickup trucks. Like they maybe don't look very fancy, you know, they're not trying to do anything crazy, but you can just get work done with them. And so if you're just looking for like that workhorse, like both of those cameras I think are really great. I think both of those cameras are really just more about what ecosystem you want to go down. It's kind of like a Apple versus Android kind of situation. But I mean, I think the C70 is a phenomenal camera, produces a really, really great image. The autofocus on it is super helpful. The NDs are super helpful. The menu system's a little janky, but you know, there's a touchscreen on it. So it makes it getting through like some of your quick stuff a lot faster. But yeah, I think, you know, for most people, I'd probably say 70% of people, 75% of people, probably the C70 or the FX6 is probably like the way to go. And then anyone who wants to buy a Komodo, you're not going to be able to convince them otherwise. So they're probably just like the Komodo's the right camera for them. I don't think those people are really trying to decide like, should I not buy it and buy this? Like, I think if you want it, yeah, like they want it, they're going to buy it. That was me. I wanted it. I bought it. Like, but then that being said, I also needed just like a workhorse. So I ended up buying a C70 also.
It's interesting. So I'm curious, since you have both cameras, why did you decide to get both? So why did you decide to get a Komodo and a C70 as opposed to two of the same body?
So for me, I own one body and then I rent a second. And I do that for a couple different reasons. One, YouTube. So having two cameras allows me to have two different things to talk about. But then also, if I own the camera that I need to go and do the job, if a job requires a second camera body, I rent it because I don't want to. I've done this before with, especially when I was shooting mirrorless, I would have multiples of the same camera body and it's just more upkeep. And then I find myself a lot of times like making the sacrifice to bring a second camera for a client, even though I shouldn't, and I need to be charging them for it. And then also it forces me to bring out a second shooter. Cause I believe for every camera on set, you need a body on that camera. And so, you know, for me, it's like I own my Komodo, and if a client comes in and they're like, hey, we want two cameras. And I'm like, all right, are we doing two Komodos or are we doing two C70s? One way or the other. If it's two Komodos, I can just rent that second one. So there's no point in me owning two of them. I can rent that other one. And then I also bring out a shooter. And here in the Houston area, I mean, the Komodo is such a popular camera that I can rent out the camera from somebody, but then also hire that person as the camera operator. So now I've got someone who's coming along with me who knows the camera very well and can operate it without any problems.
So that's really interesting too. And that's an interesting point you made about always having a second body for a second camera. Like I definitely feel the same way. But I also feel that in a lot of my more recent work, it's been the client has specifically requested 2 cameras, I'm like, okay, cool, no problem. Like, I'm going to bill you for the second camera. And they're like, okay, yeah, absolutely. And for me, that's why for me, like, I own a lot of 2s. Like, at one point I owned 2 pockets, 2 A7Ss, 2 FX9. Like, that's why I love getting cameras in 2, because a lot of times I'll get asked for 2 camera setups, and that's just more rental income I can stash away in my pocket. But it is interesting because lately now with everything going on, crews have been, shrinking. So it's not as easy to get a second person. So, which is why I will do 2 camera stuff like by myself, but I have to go like you were saying again about client expectations. You set those expectations early on saying, listen, I'll go in with 2 cameras, but you have to understand, like, I'm not going to be operating the second camera. Like, it's going to be close up locked off, and I'll, adjust for some headroom and stuff like that. But it's not going to be like the compelling, like it's not going to be what it is. It's not going to be what it could be without having a dedicated second
operator. Yeah. I mean, I personally don't like doing 2 camera setups. I just find that the payoff typically isn't as great. Now, if we're doing like an interview type thing and we know we're not going to have any B-roll, then yes, I'm 100% down. Let's do 2 cameras. It makes editing way easier. But most of the time, we're going to do B-roll, which means, I can have 1 camera. I can punch in and out to cover any edits that I might need to. And then the B-roll will cover anything that I miss. I just typically find that when I'm doing 2 cameras, I'm bringing back so much footage and so much data between 2 cameras that like the benefits of that second angle doesn't really balance out for me, at least in the way that I do my videos, that second angle isn't as necessary. And so I typically don't like to run 2 cameras. The only time that I ever really find myself wanting to run 2 cameras and like needing to is when we're like on a super, super time crunch. So like one of my clients is a bank, and they're based in Dallas. And we've been shooting a lot of stuff with some of their big executives lately. So like basically the only person we haven't shot with on their executive board is the CEO. We shot with everyone else underneath. So chief of marketing, everyone, like all the big wigs. And when they walk in the room, they kind of hold themselves like they're like, it's their show. And our time with them is super duper limited. And so we will run multiple cameras with those type of jobs just because we don't have time. And if we make a mistake, we don't have time to fix it. So it's more of a, save our butts kind of thing and get all the angles we need in a shorter amount of time. Or, having our A camera set up on sticks, having a second camera on a gimbal. So when it's time to shift to the gimbal shots, there's no lack of time between setups. We'll even like light our scenes to make it where it makes it easier to go from one scene to another, because these guys are like snap to it when it comes to time. But typically I try my best to just operate on 1 camera, because I've had the situation happen where, we're running 2 cameras and they say like, oh, just leave it locked off on a tripod, it'll be fine. And it's not fine. Something happens. The focus is slightly off and I didn't see it, or, it stops recording for some reason, one way or another, hard drive or battery or something. And then like, while you're in the middle of interviewing them, it's not like you can stop and go walk over to the other camera, because you're going to distract them and it's going to ruin the take. So I've had so many experiences like that for me, I'm like 2 cameras, 2 shooters. Like, and if you can't afford it, it's not gonna happen. So that's just the way I run my business, but that's just to make my life a little bit easier. And if the client wants it, then, they'll pay for it.
Yeah, and that's also a good point too. And I like that approach as well, because at that point you're spreading the love to other owner operators that have that camera and other operators. So it's like, well, unlike me, where I just have both cameras and I'll operate them and pocketing that rental, you're spreading that love a little bit. So I can definitely appreciate that too. And also one thing I definitely have also run into the same kinds of difficulties that you have with operating 2 cameras. And just as a quick tip, one thing that I'll do sometimes is I'll run each camera into like a decimator multi-view or whatever and pipe that through a monitor. And granted, this is even if the client has budget for a monitor, because anything that I build out is a line item rental. So I'll pipe everything through a decimator, run that into a monitor, leave the info display up, so that way I can kind of more closely monitor, whether something's in focus, how battery's doing, what does media look like. So
yeah, that's something that I've been playing around with. Got a couple monitors that were sent in that I'm trying to like figure out like the best way to run that. And I saw you do that a lot in some of your videos, how you build like a little video village to make it easier for you to monitor the multiple cameras. I just, I don't know, like for me, I'm still trying to figure out like, okay, like our clients here, I'm like, are they going to want to pay that extra money for that? And then that's another thing for setup. And now I'm monitoring 2 cameras and like, what's the expectation there versus just, hiring people out. I mean, the main reason why I started my channel and the reason why I teach the things that I teach is because I'm trying to help as many creators who want to do this full time to make this their full time career and for them to be able to get jobs and to start making money doing this. And so if I can hire someone, that guarantees that my goal is being met. So, I'm never against like hiring people to come out and just work with me. Especially, out here, we have a lot of talented creators. And I've also found that just from a business standpoint too, like when you hire people to come out and work for you, like they typically in return the favor. So when they get a job and they need extra hands, they hire me to come out. So like I think last year probably was close to 50-50, where like half the jobs were mine and half the jobs were someone else's. And I was there as an assistant to help them out with their projects in some way. So I just find that works really well for me, because I really like to protect that. Like I love what I do, like I know that I'm blessed to be able to call what I do like my living and my job. And so I try to protect that as much as I possibly can, because I never want to get to a point where I hate this, because if I had to, switch to a new career tomorrow, I don't know what I would do. Like I'm so invested right now. It would be
Same.
nuts for me to try to think that like, I hate what I'm doing now. Let me try something different.
Same. And that's another good point too, is being able to refer people out and vice versa. It works in your favor. And that's one reason I really like Vegas, is because Vegas is such a small, I don't know what the Houston area is like, but in Vegas, it's super small town to where everyone literally knows each other. So we're all always on each other's gigs and hiring each other out and the same, but also another great benefit of sharing the love there.
Yeah, 100%.
And then kind of rounding out, I've got the quick question from CV. It is, Robert, what 6xs and other scrims do you use, like the one you used in the 2-shot corporate BTS video? So for that one, I think I used like a bleached muslin, and it was either a full grid or half grid. But I'm curious, Brandon, are there any, do you have any go-to pieces of diffusion or, modifiers that are your go-to for your lighting setups?
So recently, I actually started working with a gaffer here in the Houston area, and so if I'm being 100% honest, I don't know all the technical terms. So after watching your videos and like wanting to go all in on lighting, I started like tallying up pricing and realized that this is a whole nother world worth of gear. And so what I found was that like here in Houston, we actually have like this company, and they have vans, and then they also have like 1 ton, 2 ton, up to 5 ton grip trucks, and you can just hire a gaffer to come out. And I learned that like, okay, let me just hire someone who knows what they're doing. And that's really been like the one of the biggest keys for me when it comes to like some of my commercial client work, is that like I will just hire the truck and hire the gaffer to come out and let them handle it, because I know that like I don't know enough about picking. Like if I were to pick like a certain type, I wouldn't really know why I was picking it yet. And I'm still trying to learn a lot of that. And so like while he's setting up lighting, and I'll kind of give him my inspiration photos and say, hey, this is the type of look that we're going for. How are we going to pull this off? I've been just like recently trying to study him. But like recently, because of COVID and everything else, like the jobs that I'm able to actually bring him out on haven't been as forthcoming as I'd like for them to be, just because we're getting a lot of, limited sets. Granted, we live in Texas, so things are a little more open than most other places, but still they're trying to limit how many people are on set or even showing up on set.
Yeah, definitely. and having that resource available is such a huge luxury. Just being able to bring out a gaffer with their own truck and just having them, okay, this is what I want. And you know, ultimately it depends on the relationship too. Like, you know, some DPs are very hands-on. They really like telling, okay, I want this fabric here, maybe this one here. I want this fixture here at, you know, 10%. Give me 3 stops here, 5 stops back there. Whereas some you know, where other DPs are just like, you know, they have a working relationship with their gaffer to where it's like, okay, this is what I want, do it. And like, you know, there's no wrong or right way. It just kind of ultimately depends on your workflow and your relationship with your gaffer. So, you know, there's
Yeah, I
value
think
in
for
both.
me, I'm very hands off when it comes to working with, you know, other creators. Like I love the collaboration process. And so I like to like most of the time I like to first see like what they're gonna bring to the project. Like I'll tell them like, hey, here's what I'm thinking and like let me see what you got and let them do their thing. And because I find that like when you try to like start like forcing creators to do like one thing or just do it like basically be button pushers, you lose a certain element of it. Like even to the point to like with my editor, like most of the time, like I won't even tell him like how I want the video edited. I'm like, hey, like let me see your first run at this. And I don't want to give you any input. Let me just see what you can do creatively. And I find that I get things that I would have never thought of, or you know, they set something up in a way, and I'm like, oh, that's really unique. Like, how'd you do that? And they'll be like, oh, well, you know, I ran this type of a scrim on here, and I'm cutting this window light, or you know, whatever the case may be. And I'm like learning from them in that motion versus me like coming in with like a very like strategic plan, saying like, all right, we're gonna do it this exact way. For me, I find that like I can personally and maybe selfishly learn more by letting them kind of like do it themselves. And then now I can like kind of work backwards and figure out, okay, why did he make that decision? So I can like kind of stow that away mentally for myself.
Yeah, and ultimately that's why I love a film as the collaborative process, just because it keeps us all open to new ideas. And you know, technology is evolving so quickly, and it's becoming more readily available to where it's like the barrier to entry is nearly gone. And
Yeah.
you know, it's you know, it's nice having that availability for, you know, everyone to have. So like for me, I'm such an introvert to where it's like um, you know, again, it's hard for me to meet people, and you know, having it's hard for me to meet people, and it's hard for me to come up with all the ideas on my own. And so that's why I like the collaborative process is, you know, I know what I'm good at, but I also know what I'm not good at. So that's when I'll start to lean on other people for their resources and their knowledge and their talents to help contribute to the overall greater good. So
Well, awesome, man.
and then last comment here, we got a comment from Unfolding Ideas. Why can't all live streams look so good? I don't know. That's a good question. It might help that we're in the filmmaking space. So I've got one final question for you, Brandon. It's what are your end goals? Where do you want to be? What does your ideal situation look like? And you know, what's your dream job?
I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm kind of doing it already, you know, like I like having the creative freedom to create what I want and being able to be selective about the projects that is. Now, I don't know exactly what that creative freedom is going to look like long term. I mean, obviously, for me, I would love to start to get into some more narrative works, so shorts and features. But I wanna do it in a way that I would like to still create. You know, like I said, I love what I do, and I don't want to sacrifice that for any reason. And I know I'm blessed to be in the situation that I'm in. And so I try to make sure that, like, you know, whatever that next step is, like when it comes to shooting shorts or shooting narratives, that I'm going to pick the projects that are best for me, projects that I want to do, because I got to protect, you know, where I'm currently at. But at the end of the day, like for me, family comes first. And so whatever's best for my family, that's what I'm going to do. But luckily right now where I'm at, and, you know, I mean, I feel like anyone who made it through 2020, I think you're pretty strong. If anything, it made us stronger. And so now it's like, I feel like, you know, nothing else can hold us back. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I love what I do. My dream job is just to keep creating, keep making awesome stuff. I don't want to really pigeonhole myself into anything in particular. Like right now, yes, I do YouTube full time, but YouTube to me is just a platform. It's just an outlet. And that could easily be something else in the future. I don't know what that'll be. And if it is YouTube for the next 10 years, then awesome. But if it's something else, like I'm totally open to whatever that might be.
Well, that's super awesome, and I am super stoked to see how doing YouTube full time will pan out for you. And I'm, all this has been helping me tremendously too, because I'm relatively new in the YouTube space, and I've definitely taken a lot from your insights and your perspective on and how you approach creating content and stuff like that. So, first of all, I want to thank you again for so much for taking the time. And really quick, where can people find you?
So you can find me on pretty much all the socials at BWash Media, BWASH Media. And I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and then if you go on YouTube and you type in Brandon Washington, you'll find me there as well. Just here to help out. If anyone has any questions, feel free and reach out, DM me. On my Instagram, I have a number. You can actually text me there too. So if you have questions, you can text me. I'm down to help anybody I can. If you're in this creative space and you're trying to get better and there's any way I can help you in that, just let me know and I'll try my best.
That's super awesome. Well, thank you again for all your insight. And, again, it's
no problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been very insightful. Again, maybe out of my own self-interest, just learning from a YouTube creator. But thank you again. And for those of you still watching, if you appreciate my content here on YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and plug my Patreon. It's down in the description. One of the big perks is having a Discord group, and we're having a lot of meaningful conversations there. And it's a really cool community that people are bouncing ideas back and forth. And actually, starting tomorrow, we're going to start doing watch parties, and we're going to be screening The Boys. Brandon, have you seen The Boys on Amazon?
I love it. It's a great show.
It's a wild show. We've been kind of voting, and that's kind of looks like where it seems to be going. So that's what we'll be watching over the next couple of weeks, and it's a pretty wild time. And I'm excited to do a little bit more of these Gearside chats with other collaborators and other industry folk. And a lot of you have actually been asking for a coloring session, so I'm excited to.
Hey, do you mind if I'm going to hop off for just 1 second?
Yeah, you got it. No worries.
Take over.
And you got it. And I'm excited to also, again, get the coloring session in the works. And a lot of you have been asking for that. So I'm trying to structure it in a way that I can send out sample footage so that if you're following along, you can grade the same clips that I'm grading. And if you have any questions for either me or Brandon, obviously, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.